Tonight on Inside the Tower, we dive into the ultimate what if. What if John Textor or 777 Partners had taken over Everton Football Club? We'll unpack the problems Crystal Palace are facing right now. Imagine if Everton and Roma found themselves in Europe. What could that mean for both clubs? Join us as we explore the takeover that almost happened.
So yeah, we'll just have a discussion really on what if, in light of what's happened at Crystal Palace, and the fallout with that with John Textor, and what could have been if Everton went with John Textor last year when he was looking to buy shares or take over Everton, and with the set 777, with what's happened with them. And obviously the problems there with Standard Liège and whatnot. So basically, it's a what if could have happened to Everton, and I think we're lucky in getting the Freakling group in, because I think they're a little bit more business savvy and have their head screwed on, whereas John Textor, it's probably not just his own fault what happened at Palace. I think there's a lot of people there that should have piped up and said something earlier. And the changing of the date as well didn't help, to the 1st of March when they had to either put his shares in a blind fund. But then again, Forest managed to do it. They were preempting, but they were third in the league at the time. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on the 777 and John Textor before we get into the crux of it?
For me, John Tex will have known well in advance of what he's doing, or should have known well in advance what he was doing. If Crystal Palace did win the FA Cup, what the outcome was going to be, and what he had to do. Now, I don't believe for 1 second that he would have been waiting for Crystal Palace to win the FA Cup for him then to make his decision. If there's a chance that your team wins the FA Cup and you're saying, "Now we want to be in Europe, you need to be making them steps well before the date. And any business person will tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
You may not submit the paperwork, but you have it all signed, sealed, and in the envelope. And then if you don't need it, it goes through the shredder.
Exactly. And that's...
But the deal, it's already got to be in place and ready to go. You can't say, "Okay, great, we've won the FA Cup. Now we're going to start trying to make things happen." It's too late at that stage for things like that to happen. Yes, I know Crystal Palace did it, but Nottingham Forest did it. But he must have been sat there on that final whistle, having just won the FA Cup. And he must have been thinking all sorts.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you're in a multi-club, you have a multi-club ownership, I think to the get-go, you've got to think, right, we own 2 clubs. What are the chances? Palace getting into Europe? Very unlikely, but let's plan just in case.
Yeah.
And I think
And even if they said, "Okay, right, we're in the quarterfinals now, we need to start at least having a look at it at the FA," when they're in the... Great. I'm not saying you've got to do it on round. Is it round 3 or 4 they come in at the Premier League? I can't remember what round it is they come in at now.
Round 3, yeah. And it was the 1st of March they were playing Millwall, I think, and that was the date they should have had it in by. But then there is a 30-day window or something that, because Nottingham Forest didn't get in on the 1st of March. There was a slight, you can delay it a little bit.
Yeah, I don't believe for 1 second that somebody hadn't already had that conversation with him.
Yeah. Well, his argument is he doesn't have significant influence in Crystal Palace. He has a 40% share, but he doesn't have... I'm sorry, that anyone with half a brain cell will go, "Hang on a minute, you've got 40% shares." Okay, it's not... Apparently, he hasn't got the voting right. The other board members have more of a right than he does. I'm sorry, if you're looking at figures alone, 40% would say to me that you're going to have some sort of pull in that club, and that's his get out of clause, basically. And then his argument was, well, if I had significant say in Crystal Palace, I would have brought half the Leon team or half of the Botafogo team over to Palace to increase the playing staff and make them better.
Yeah.
But
What I could see earlier, he's got 43%, or he owns 43% of the club, and he's got 25% voting rights
yeah,
and non-voting agreement was the terminology that I kept coming up against when I was doing some research for it. I'm sorry, if you've got 43% ownership in the club, you may not be able to vote, but I bet you can make votes happen your way if you want them to.
of course. The thing is,
So, yeah.
the thing is with all this now, the argument for him, I would say, well, hang on a minute, the competition doesn't start till August time, so why are we doing it? 3 or 4 months beforehand. Why don't we wait until before the competition starts? Then you can put your shares in a blind trust, and everything's good. A lot of people have said on the page as well when this I put a post up the other week about Girona and Man City, but what Girona did, they put their funds in a blind trust long before, and with RB Salzburg and Leipzig, them two, there was no conflict of interest when UEFA looked into it in 2017. But there's ways around this multi-club ownership. But the only thing I don't agree with, if they're going to let teams and owners have a multi-club model, why are you putting rules in that contradicts what these owners are trying to do? You're allowing multi-club, but then you're ring fencing saying, well, you can do this, but you can't have all that comes with it. So they have to, I think in a period of time, they're going to have to change the rules and make it more accessible because they're allowing it to happen, but they're not allowing the two same clubs to compete. And it doesn't have to be 43%. It could be someone in, for example, the Freetling Group could have another interest in, for example, I don't know, PSG. One of the people who work for Freedom Group, who work with Everton, could have some sort of interest in PSG, and that could cause problems as well. So it doesn't have to be a full ownership or a certain percentage, as long as they have direct involvement in another club and Everton at the same time, then it could cause problems. What are your thoughts on it all, Liam?
Well, it's very similar to you guys, but it begs the question, doesn't it? If we say we qualify for Europe this year and we're in the same competition as Roma, who's who are they choosing to put the blind trust in place for, us or them? Who's the bigger club on paper? It's a tough one, and then which fan base are you going to rile up, because it would be a bit of an issue. Going back into the original point, just that simmer for a bit, maybe we can come over that later. But Strasbourg, Chelsea, another thing that's been brought up. You might have heard it in the background. Obviously, Strasbourg, sorry, we're in that sixth place. Last game of the season, got beat 3-2. I think it was a massive delay against Le Havre or someone like that, and who were bottom of the league, needs to win. 98th minute penalty goes in. Strasbourg finished seventh. Chelsea, Conference League winners in Europa League. For the cat among the pigeon, are Palace and Leon combined bigger than Chelsea with billions of pounds spent, and little old Strasbourg, who's their feeder club, who is owned by the Blue Cartel, shall we say? It's so many different avenues you go down. You picked up on a really good point there, Chris, with Girona and City, and you're right. Obviously, things were put in place long before. I mean, and Girona, they weren't ever seen as a club who were going to get the Champions League, but they did. Fair play to them. But yeah, it goes back to the first question. My worry is, who do they see as their kind of the jewel in the crown, as to speak, for the Freaking Group? Both hold merit, but Roma have been successful recently. Europa League winners, Champions League, close this year, Champions League. Historically massive club. Rome, massive city. I'm not trying to belittle my own club here. Of course not. We've got a massive history ourselves. We are one of the founder members, and we are a Premier League forever. But in recent time and history, it'd be a very, very interesting situation we find ourselves in.
Just a quick timeline with Textor though. Obviously he took 43% stake. in Palace, but he had 40% stake in Lyon, and it went to 77.49% through Eagle Football Holdings. So he has a bigger stake in Lyon. So he has more of a say in that club, I'd say. In January 2022, he obviously invests in Brazilian club Botafogo. We know the history there. They've come up and they've won everything and the equivalent to the Champions League, done really well. And he also has a stake in Belgian side RWD Molenbeek. And obviously under Textor, Palace have won the FA Cup qualifying for Europa League, and then in March, that's the deadline, resolving any multi-club ownership and any conflicts, which he obviously didn't do. 23rd of June this year, Woody Johnson, owner of the New York Jets, agrees to buy Texas 43% stake in Palace for 190 million. And then recently, 11th of July, UEFA has demoted Palace down to the Conference League due to the multi-club ownership conflict with Lyon. Now, obviously, they're going to go to the Court of Arbitration to try and fight that and the appeal, and they may look at it with a different specs on. And that plays out to Forest as well then, because if Forest, obviously they'll get promoted to the Europa League, which again is more money and everything. So Forest end up getting a better deal considering they haven't done anything, but they did do the right thing back in March. And then recently, Textor confirms he's looking to buy another UK club after selling a stake in Crystal Palace. But then what club's he going to buy, and is that going to have another conflict of interest, and is he going to go down the same road with another club? So whether that's another Premier League club, who knows? I think UEFA have got to look at this, especially moving forward. I mean, from a selfish point of view, from Evertonians' point of view, we need to sort them pretty quick, because if our trajectory is to get into Europe, it needs to be rectified, and it just shows the issues Leon have faced. I mean, I think it's something like the 1 billion in debt, but that doesn't include profit of players and how much assets they've got and how much the stadium's worth and all the players. So imagine if John Textor would have took over Everton, would he have financed us through debt? Would be in a worse position than what we are now with the Freakin Group. I mean, time will tell with the Freakin Group. So it is a worry. And I just think the what if, like we said at the beginning, what if he took over Everton? I think it was just him just testing the water, maybe. But obviously, he was looking to sell his shares last year. It wasn't just now. So I do feel sorry for Palace and Palace fans over this. But then again, other clubs like Girona put their funds in a blind trust. So it's common knowledge that this can be done. So prior planning and preparation, that's something that should have been done, really.
And that's the bit I can't get my head around, why somebody at Palace wasn't screaming about this earlier. That bit doesn't make sense to me. If, as fans of another football club, we can look at the rules and say, well, it's pretty straightforward. This is what you need to do. Surely somebody at Crystal Palace was doing this. And somebody sat there and said, he's still not done it. He's still not done it. He's still not done it. And they've just allowed him to do it. So yeah, as the fans, as the players, and even as those involved with Crystal Palace on the footballing side, yeah, my heart goes with them, and it's absolutely rubbish what's happened to them. And what is their biggest event as a football club to win their first domestic trophy and then go on to celebrate, we're in Europe and stuff, then to have this happen to them. But the business side of the club, and any Premier League football club, and even to be fair, even if lower leagues going down now, if you look at the likes of Wrexham, for a number of years now, they've had the footballing side, they've had the business, and they've had the business side of it. The business side of Crystal Palace needs to have a long, hard look at themselves and say, why have we allowed this to happen? That's what's happened. They've known about it. They know what he's doing, but they've just chose to. Perhaps they've not chose to sit there, but it looks like they've just sat there. Now they're starting to moan about it. So from a footballing side, my heart goes out to you. But from a business side of football, somebody somewhere needs to be asking a few harder questions as to how are we now in this mess that we're in.
Yeah. I think probably John Textor thought, well, I've got a significant share, just shy of half in Palace. If these funds go into a blind trust, he doesn't have control of them. The trustee has control of them and where them shares go to and what money's made off them. So he doesn't have a great control on them. He'll still get his dividends and whatnot from them, but it's not the same amount that if he leaves them in with Palace, their share price would have went up through the roof when they got into Europe and won the FA Cup. So maybe he's just thinking, I can make even more money and then just play dumb. Maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Don't
Yeah.
know. But I think Crystal Palace will now be really, really upset over it.
And he's left now. That's it. He's
Yeah.
gone. So
He's gone.
he's got 180, 190 million from selling. You got any more thoughts on that, Liam?
Yeah, just something's missing, as you're both saying. It's too straightforward to be, for these guys who are multi millionaires, hundreds of millions, if not, arguably on paper, he could be close to worth billions, having a lot of shares in football teams who are dealing with hundreds of millions of pound revenue every year. Something doesn't quite sit right with me. He spoke well on Talk Sport. Of course, he's trying to defend himself. Simon Jordan was kind of on his side in a way, but something just isn't right. I mean, you just wouldn't.
These are not new rules that have just come out.
No.
These rules have been in football for
and this is
many
this
years.
is UEFA rules. This is UEFA rules. This isn't this isn't Premier League related. He come out with some baffling stuff, like saying he was close to buying Everton. He couldn't have bought Everton. He had 43% shares in Palace. It's impossible. You're not allowed to. You know what I mean? So something's not quite right. He seems like a good bloke. He spoke well. I thought his heart was in the right place. I think he does like football, soccer to him. But I'm not too sure. To me, it seems something seems a bit fishy. I
There's
just
a piece of
wonder
the
if it's to
puzzle
do.
missing somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, all the stuff that Leon are going through, all the money, all the rumours, the stuff that's out there, paying more players that was on the roster and the links. He's talking about bringing players from Botafogo and Molenbeek over to Europe and Brazil and vice versa. And he's done that a lot with Leon. But is it not kind of, I don't know, a lot of grey area there, isn't there? A lot of grey matter to be playing with in terms of potentially cooking the books as such. And I don't know. I think that's why maybe Steve Parish and the other two had, the decisive role, if you like, in that ownership model. Probably just kept in there because he did say he funded a lot of the academy, kind of come out of COVID and helped invest just to bring Palace through. But they didn't really want him there by the looks of it. I think that's why he was keen to kind of move on as quick as he could. So yeah, it doesn't sit right with me, as I said. Again, I'm not a businessman, but the amount of years with Everton have been involved directly with all this PSR trouble and all the financial and takeover issues, you just tend to lean in and go, the similar worries with 777 when they were involved with trying to buy Everton, it just didn't sit right. Nothing seemed to fit. That there's, as you said, there was a missing piece of the puzzle. And Texter, I don't know, something along there. It seems a bit odd.
777. I don't know what everyone's thoughts are on them. We definitely could have been sold down the river there by Farhad if he had his way with 777 and they passed and become our owners. We would have been in absolutely a terrible state. And I don't think a lot of Evertonians know how close we were to administration at the time. Getting 200 million loans here to keep us going. It was a real bad time. I mean, when they acquired Standard Liège for 55 million euros, you know, three, a year and a bit later, Standard Liège fans are protesting the lack of investment and the ambition under 777 ownership. 3 months later, again, Standard Liège received an indefinite transfer ban due to unpaid taxes, salaries, and transfer fees. 5, 6 months later, former owners of Standard Liège and the club stadium demanded seizure of 777 assets in Belgium due to the alleged non-payment. And then the court ruled that 777 assets in Belgium could be seized. Days later, legal proceedings were initiated in the US against 777 partners and the investment funds claiming that were owed millions of dollars after 777 pledged assets that it didn't own as collateral for the loan. So they had assets that weren't even theirs and they're using it against the loan, which is just absolutely shocking. And that would have been a shit show if they took over us.
We'd have lost a lot.
Mm.
We'd have lost a lot. We'd have lost Goodison Park. We'd have lost the ladies' facilities. We'd have lost Finch Farm. Players would have deserted us like rats on a sinking ship. We'd have lost sponsorships. Everybody would have pulled out of Everton Football Club. We'd have been dead. We wouldn't be trading anymore.
Nah. I think it's in a way with the problems that they had with Standard Liège last year. I think that really helped us because if that never came to light, none of the following would have happened and they would have acquired us and then we would have been in the same, we would have been in the right, like you said, we would have lost everything because we'd have to fund their debt. They'd have to sell off loads of assets. It's called asset stripping when they come in and sell everything off. What your thoughts then, Liam? I mean, I know I've gone through a lot there, but they have got a lot of baggage.
Yeah. Well, this is it, isn't it? And they were arguably, I can't say for sure, but it looks like they were leveraging one against the other. I think there was also airlines involved, I believe. There was a number of airlines or small budget airlines that were using to kind of, as an overarching kind of, I don't know, filter, if you like, for money go through and coming out one end, and then it was getting leveraged in different assets from different clubs or whatever they were. And this ACAP that are involved, who were their kind of creditors above them. And it's all just, I mean, it's scary, really, isn't it? It's scary to think that a football club in the Premier League, a long-standing football club. Yeah, we've had their issues with Mashiri, but he never. I mean, yes, okay, we had some issues. Of course, we came close to potential administration, but a lot of the times back then, administration is 9 points. It's not 10. So maybe some fans would go, let's take administration over getting charged. There was a lot of this to and fro, and I remember sitting and listening to many fan groups going, "We'll take the administration, get rid of Mashiri, take the administration, let's move on." To think 777 come very, very close to purchasing this football club with debt already against it. As you said, we took out numerous loans. To think they would not have never paid them loans off. They would have been in debt above and beyond what they could even afford. And to think they would have been sat on the Premier League board, they would have sat in the European board. I think he was already, the guy leading with it. He was already sat in the fairly high level of UEFA as a kind of a member of the overseas kind of contingent who was obviously at Standard Liège already. Don't forget they had Vasco da Gama as well, who were a massive, massive historical club in Brazil, and just ruined the. And Standard Liège, who had grown up, they were the champions of Belgium. They were the big team in Belgium. Some really good. We got Mario and Fellaini from them. Had some really good players coming through years ago. It's worrying. It's worrying that it was allowed to get that far. It was worrying that Mashiri was even, playing devil's advocate, if you like, trying to risk maybe trying to get them interested to see who else would come out the woodwork. And then John Textor appeared, and luckily the Freakins came. They went. I think they waited to see what was really going to come to fruition, like they did with Roma a little bit. The carrot was dangled, and eventually they took control and bought it. But yeah, I wonder if we should say a little bit of a thank you to the Premier League. I think they sat on it a long time, the Premier League. It went through the different approval routes. It then comes to the Premier League, and they never actually authorised the sale. And I just wonder whether there was talking going on in the background between Mashiri and others at the club and the Premier League saying they can't afford it. Look at the state of Standard Liège. Look at Vasco. Look at all they're going through. it was like smoke and mirrors, wasn't it, with them? Let's be honest. What they were, it just wasn't. It wasn't real. It was all just fake. It was all just made up, realistically. And we're
I think
lucky.
they were
We're
just
lucky.
in so much debt they didn't know how to get out.
They
didn't
just
know.
bit off more. They bit off more they
Yeah.
could chew, didn't they? They
They've
thought
got
they
all
could.
they've got all these plates spinning, and they're all starting to crash.
Yeah.
They were just looking for. I honestly think Everton would have just been a bit of a stepping stone for them to
Potentially.
try and get more, perhaps more into the Premier League, when the boards, the Premier League, UEFA, wherever it was they were trying to get. It
I
certainly
think
they had no interest in supporting the club.
no, I think it was all about money. The amount of revenue that comes through a Premier League club, but no matter what size you are, the amount of money that comes, even let's be honest, if we got relegated, the parachute payments alone are that big nowadays that would have funded them rather than the club, because obviously they're the owners. They would have a majority share, 98.8%, as the Friedkins have got. They would have got all that money. They wouldn't have invested. They would have said, you know,
They would have
sorry,
asset stripped us to pay off their debts elsewhere, and hope we just, we just carry on as we are, just bottom of the table, struggling, but using the money that we generate with the new stadium and everything else to fund them and help them pay off all their other problems.
Mm-hmm. As we know, cash flow is always the big issue in clubs of this size. You need that cash flow, and Everton haven't had cash flow for years. You look at size United; they're struggling. So of course they're not in debt. They're not going to go bust. Of course they're not. It's Man United, but revenue is only one thing. Have that cash flowing through to be able to spend it freely, and then recoup it. It's what you need. It's what you need to have. And they would have really struggled. They really would have struggled massively.
Scary, innit? What could have happened and the what ifs. But luckily, none of that happened. So we did have a bit of good fortune come our way, and the freaking group had took over. Like I said earlier, the only issue is the multi-club ownership with Roma and us. So that is the only problem I can foresee, unless the rules change and they make it
Well,
more.
unless they've already started looking into it.
Well, you would do, wouldn't you? You'd think that would be one of the, you'd have a key points of when you take over Everton, right? What are the key points? What are the areas we've got to strengthen, and what have we got to look at from a financial point of view, from a playing point of view? How does this business model look to us as owners and to everyone else? And it's got to be one of the big things you've got to look at.
They seem to be a bit more business savvy. They are bringing in, from what I've seen and what I understand, they are very, very business orientated. And the bit that they weren't 100% savvy on was the footballing side. Now they are now starting to bring footballing people in.
Yeah.
Who have got experience, have got knowledge, have got understanding. And once again, for me, that just shows that they are proper business people. We can know how to run a business, we can do that bit, but we don't know how to run a football team. So we can bring the correct people in to help us do that in the Premier League. Can we then look to bring the right people in so that we can build that team, that club, into a successful business going forward?
Yeah.
And for me, all the noises that they are making, that's what they are looking to do at the moment. They've given David Moyes what he needs. They're letting him bring the people in that he wants. He didn't want where we're having a director of football and all that. They've changed all that. You don't want that? Fine, we'll change it. Not a problem. What do you want? What do you need? And what can we give you to make you successful? Because I don't think they're here for the short term. I think they're in it for the long haul if they can make it last that long. And if it goes correct, then that's what they'll do.